I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the polyvagal theory. And this was created by a researcher, a scientist, Stephen W. Porges or Porgs. Um, and I'm going to share some passages from the book that he wrote with his son, Our Polyvagal World. In my studies, I've learned a lot about something called the vagus nerve, which is a lot of people associate that with like a spiritual part of our physical form. Um, Sort of like you might envision the third eye concept. Uh, so the polyvagal nerve is a nerve that reaches from the back of your head, your brain stem, straight down your spine to your tailbone. This particular nerve uh, is really in touch with the whole body. And if you think about nerves, the idea that there is like signals being sent through the nerves uh, in order to move your muscles, and in order to blink, in order to talk. Um, Something I found interesting was the word vagal is kind of coming from, consider the word vagabond, someone who's traveling, like making moves, distance. So the idea of a vagal nerve that is reaching or journeying through all parts of our body. Um, some parts of it are automatic, right? We don't even have to think about breathing or blinking or swallowing, unless we do start thinking about it. And then other things, right? Like if I want to get dressed and walk out the door, that requires a bit more intentional thought on my part. But anyway, I'm going to share some key points from his theory, and maybe you might learn something cool from it. First of all, when we feel safe, our bodies transform in a way that optimizes us for social connectedness, health, growth, and restoration. This is the healing state of homeostasis. When we feel unsafe, threatened, dysregulated, our bodies respond by activating defensive systems that optimize us for immediate survival at the cost of our ability to heal, grow, and restore. There's a lot of discussion about how to make, for example, schools a safer space for students, for teachers, for families as a whole, so that students are more likely to be in their regulated state of homeostasis and are much more able to create and learn and grow without having to feel threatened or unsafe, either at an emotional level, psychological, or at a physiological level, like bodies on alert. When we feel unsafe, our bodies will instinctively do whatever it takes to end these feelings. You might think of the fight, flight, or freeze. When we are deprived of opportunities to feel safe, our mental and physical health suffers. In the modern world, many people are almost entirely deprived of opportunities to feel safe. And that manifests as anxiety, trauma, stress, unchecked emotions, aggression, violence, poor health, or dis-ease. Whether we feel safe or unsafe, our bodies telegraph these feelings to those around us, including our children. So you might even be able to tell from someone's body language, right? If they're on alert, if they're not feeling like calm, cool, and collected, you can pretty much immediately tell. And that kind of messages our physical form to be, oh, that person's on edge. I wonder why. Is there something in the environment? Is there a reason I should be like more on guard with this person? So thinking about how our energy and what we output really does impact the people around us. We often mirror the feelings and states of those around us. And likewise, those around us mirror whatever feelings and states we project. You might consider that to be like an autonomic echo chamber. Autonomic essentially meaning automatic. I envision just all this energy waves bouncing around and how a group of people can immediately become like very distressed and fearful simply because like one person is feeling that way, right? It's kind of like a huge sweep across the group. So there's this idea of neuroception. It's an automatic process driven by external cues of threat or safety, and it is outside our conscious control. However, we can be informed by our reactions to it and use our knowledge about what makes us feel safe or unsafe to navigate the world around us. So consider the word perception, right? When you're perceiving a situation, perceiving your surroundings, there's this idea of neuroception, like at the nerve level, at a much smaller scale, our body can also sense threat or safety. Um, that could be simply by the surroundings feeling a little off. That could be certain sounds that you hear in your environment, whether it be honestly like loud noises, fireworks, gunshots, big explosions, but also consider music and birds chirping and singing. Like that also instills some feelings of safety. So neuroception is pretty neutral in that way. It's just perceiving the environment at a much smaller scale. Trauma is not just psychological, it is physiological and can cause real changes in the body. All of us have different levels of resilience. The same event may prove deeply traumatic for one person while barely impacting another. I kind of like to say there's no such thing as the trauma Olympics, right? Like there's no need to compete. My suffering is worse than yours, and therefore I should be blank. Everyone's experience is relative. And just like this book says, if the same two people experience the same event at the same time, they might have vastly different reactions to it. Many mental and physical health diagnoses are characterized by a nervous system that is biased towards feeling unsafe. Many people assume that we respond to threats by running, fleeing, or fighting. In truth, when our bodies feel threatened, we sometimes respond by freezing, dissociating, shutting down. And that response is autonomic, AKA automatic, and outside of our conscious control. Feeling safe is necessary for living a good life and bonding with others. Feeling safe can support therapeutic interventions in mental and physical health by putting the body into a state that's primed for healing. When we feel threatened, we have a difficult time transmitting feelings of safety to others. So when other people come off as threatening to us, it's often because they themselves do not feel safe. And we respond to threatening others in ways that only make them feel more threatened and more likely to lash out in return. It's kind of like that echo chamber back and forth, like you are just increasing each other's reaction. Through the neuroception, you might not even fully understand what's going on, right? But your body's picking up on these cues, on these energy signals. I want to go back to the part that I mentioned about the freeze. Um, there's some controversy when it comes to people who have experienced this automatic freeze response, this idea that why didn't you fight back? A lot of victim blaming. Why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you scream for help? Why didn't you run? Why did you just let it happen? This book is really trying to, or this theory is really trying to share and uplift people who have had that experience, that freeze reaction. It is a very natural way for the body to respond to trauma, to danger. Think of animals in nature playing dead, quote unquote, in order to increase their chance of survival. So when you think about court cases and juries and judgment from communities, from families and friends, um, about whatever experience you may have had, that freeze response, that quote unquote doing nothing, was one way that you were trying to protect yourself. Again, the book is called Our Polyvagal World. I have a few more points and then I'll close. So the vagus plugs into the part of the brain stem that controls social behaviors like verbalizing, vocalizations, facial expressions, and our ability to listen to speech, particularly human speech. So as a result, we can only access some social behaviors when we feel safe. And isn't it interesting that when we engage in positive social behaviors, when we have a meal with others, when we create together, when we play together, adventure together, even like sleep together, that promotes health and wellness. And when we do not feel safe, it is very difficult to form an emotional bond with another person. Safe social behavior effectively acts as a trigger for our vagus nerve, and it calms us down and helps us to regulate ourselves. That's why there's such a thing as co-regulation, this idea that you can regulate another person simply by also being safe around them. Consider a parent figure, a teacher, a guardian that is comforting a child that's, in a tantrum mode, is scared. That's their warm and calm energy is co-regulation for the young person. You can do that with friends when they're grieving too, right? Holding someone, using soft language, um, helping them to just breathe. You are co-regulating, and that's such a beautiful thing that humans can do. um, hmm. I think something that might be relevant to the time now when people don't feel safe, they can't access the higher brain functions required for critical thinking, right? Remember the students in a school feeling super unsafe, it's hard for them to learn. So this offers an explanation for why politicians and media figures often try to make people feel unsafe. There's all this like misinformation in the news, all of this scandal and controversy and just harsh language. That is a lot of this idea of like fear mongering, I believe, right? Like trying to instill fear in people because when they feel fearful, they don't feel safe. And when they don't feel safe, they can't think critically and make educated decisions. They're acting from a state of fear. So that it promotes violence, that promotes, unhealthy social behavior, aggression, even isolation. So finally, the act of play can be viewed as a neural exercise that allows us to practice this kind of flowing from all these states from maybe a bit more aware on edge to more calm. It is not always a bad thing to go into the fight or flight mode. The idea is to practice going back and forth and being able to regulate yourself um, appropriately, so that overall you can be more creative, that you can produce, so that you can be happier. Um, I know that was a lot of information all at once. And again, it's all connected to the polyvagal nerve in our body. And finally, the breath. That's why I kind of led us a bit through the meditation. I learned in this book that the longer you extend your exhale, the more likely you are to regulate yourself, right? If you're panicked and nervous, notice you have like this short, uh, they're like hyperventilating essentially, right? Imagine if you're having a panic or anxiety attack, you're like, versus nice and slow and long. Again, cueing your body to regulate itself. We have so much power in the breath. And I know it's maybe repeated over and over and over, but consider how that you can use that natural tool to work for you. And I will close it there. Again, Our Polyvagal World, How Safety and Trauma Change Us by Stephen W. Porges.